Let's move on to the tweaks and FX page. Now remember, these are all the parameters that couldn't be fit onto the synth page. We have some general settings at the top, and let's go over those in this video. On the very top left, we have the voice control. A mode, priority, voices, stack, drift, and soft attack. A lot of these play off each other, and these parameters are very common, whether that be a hardware unit, software unit, digital, analog, you name it. These are just basic settings that come with the synth. Let's start off with mode. We have 4 different modes available to us. Polyphonic. That just means we can play more than one note at a time, and we're limited to 6 in this case, to the voice count. And go all the way up to 16. This setting allows you to play chords, everything up to 6 voices at the same time. Now remember, if your envelope has a long release, something like this, those long tails still count as a voice. So if you have a long tail, we can hear those earlier notes being dropped off. Next up, we have monophonic. Again, real simple, just allows you to play one note at a time. And every time you play a note, it's going to re-trigger the envelope. Let's drop down the sustain. We can hear what happens every time we play a new note. No matter what, every note re-triggers that envelope. Below that, we have legato. Now, this is the same thing as monophonic as far as voices are concerned. However, the envelope generator doesn't get re-triggered until there's a space between 2 different notes. So if we play legato, we can hear that envelope continue on. If we detach the notes or leave a space in between the two, the envelope generator gets re-triggered. And finally, we have duo mode or duophonic. This allows us to play 2 notes at the same time, and the lower of the 2 trigger oscillator 1 and 3, and the higher of the 2 trigger 2 and 4. So right now, I only have oscillator 1 patched. If I also patch oscillator number 2, and let's pan these out just so we can hear the difference. And if we play a single note, it's triggering both oscillators. And if we play 2 notes, it's going to split those oscillators, and we'll get a higher note and a lower note. And that leads us to priority. Now, priority only comes into play when we're in mono or legato mode. Last just means the last note that's played takes over. So let's go back to monophonic mode. And then, like I said, the last note that's played takes over. Okay, lowest note played takes over, and highest note takes over. And these are just emulating different styles of synths. Down at the very bottom, we have a drift control and a soft attack. Now take a listen to the difference when I turn on and off soft attack. Specifically the attack, obviously. Now I actually think that this is a soft attack with it turned off. That sounds soft to me. And that sounds like it has a little bit of a click to me. A little bit of a pop. And there's a difference between the two. You pick whichever one you like. Next we have drift. Now I want you to listen to a repeating note with drift turned off. It's exactly the same. Now if we turn drift on, changes in pitch just ever so slightly. And that helps the machine gun effect go away. And that helps this sound a little more analog with imperfections and detuning just a little bit. Next, let's go on to tune control. We have a pitch bend up and a pitch bend down amount. Let's turn this back up again so we can hear it. There we go. So using the pitch bend, up and down a full step. Next we have a general transpose. We can bring us back up to 0, or we can do the good old trick of transposing everything to C major. So you have to play nothing but the white keys. Next to that, we have a fine tune control. And then we have the vibrato. Now, I brought this up a little bit earlier in a previous video. Now let's take a look at how this works. Vibrato is controlled by LFO1. So here we have LFO1 and nothing is patched. Let's also make sure the mod wheel is selected under amp mod and turn that all the way up. Let's also turn the vibrato all the way up. So with the modulation wheel all the way down, we have no vibrato. And now we can turn that modulation wheel up and get vibrato. Next up, we have glide. All right, now this is just like the lag generators from earlier, except we can now control pitch. We have an amount knob, which controls the basic speed of the glide, so all the way down, nothing. We can slowly turn that up. And this is sometimes called portamento. Some analog synthesizers also call it slew. All means the same thing. And we also have a mode, a time, and a rate. With time selected, the glide time will always be the same, no matter how far apart the notes are. With rate selected, the glide time is longer when the notes are further apart and shorter when they're closer together. So here's time. All the same time. With rate selected, we'll have different glide times. Next to that, we have range. This is kind of like a strength knob. With it turned all the way up, we start with the original note. With range turned down, we kind of start halfway in between. With it turned really far down, we start very close to the ending note. Very interesting effect. And that brings us to offset 2 and 4. Now this means we can set up 2 different glide amounts or speeds depending on which oscillators, which filters, etc. we use. So we have oscillator 1 and 2 already patched. And let's see what happens when we turn this knob clockwise and counterclockwise. And there you have it. Now I want to come back to our synth page and go down to the MIDI and more panel here. We have a key 1 and key 2 output, and I promised you would come back and visit this later. Now these outputs are key tracking whatever you play on your keyboard. So if we were to map key 1 to the cutoff, or better yet, the resonance. If we play lower on the keyboard, the resonance will be lower. If we play higher on the keyboard, the resonance will be higher. This key tracking also follows glide. So if glide is set to a long time, that keyboard tracking will, say, sweep from low to high along with the note. It also follows the pitch bend. Now, this is also why we have key 1 and key 2. Key 1 follows oscillators 1 and 3. And if we set offset to 2 and 4, key 2 will follow that offset. So not only can we glide different amounts for 1 and 3 and 2 and 4, but our key tracking will also follow 1 and 3 and 2 and 4. And that is the glide section of Batzilla. Next we have the oscilloscope, and everything here is the same as from the synth page. And then we have stack voice tuning. And this allows us to stack voices with every note that we play. So going back to the voice control, we can set a number here for the number of voices per note that we want to use. Right now it's set to 1, so when we play a note, you only hear one voice or one oscillator. Now if I set that to 2, we have 2 voices. And that brings up a lot of cool features. You heard the glide amounts change. And we're actually having 2 voices sound for every one note that I play on a MIDI controller. And I'm still in mono mode here. And I can even detune those 2 voices. Let's turn this off for a second. Now we have that supersaw type sound. Now we could even say do an octave type thing. Let's reset voice 1 and bring this one up to 12. Now we have an octave. If we went into polyphonic mode, now it's about to get crazy. We get some very thick, very lush sounds to the stack voice tuning. Now remember, we can also fine-tune parameters by holding Shift. So if I want to really fine-tune these voices so they're just barely out of tune with each other, I'm going to hold Shift and just barely tune one up and barely tune one down. We have that chorusy, phasey type sound from those 2 voices. Double click and they reset. Once again, let's jump back to the MIDI and more panel here. We can talk about the stack voice. Now this corresponds to the voice tuning here as well, except this outputs voltage according to how many voices we have selected from the stack control here. With 1 voice selected, stack voice outputs a 5-volt signal. With 2 voices selected, stack voice outputs a 5-volt and a negative 5-volt signal. With 3 voices selected, stack voice outputs 5-volt, 0, and negative 5-volt signal. All right, so just to help you hear this, let's drop out oscillator number 2. Okay, great. And let's drop the stack voice onto pitch modulation and turn that up. Okay, great. Now since stack is set to 1, it's outputting 5 volts, which is increasing the pitch of oscillator 1. Now let's set this to 2 voices. we have those 2 voltages going to the pitch modulation. Go to 3. We have those 3 voltages going to the pitch modulation. So stack voice medium more output directly corresponds to this number and our stack voice tuning. Next up, we have micro tuning. This is actually really cool. In the Western world, we have our 12-step scale, C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E, F, etc. And these notes are all 100 cents apart. Now, in other parts of the world, this is not the case. We might have a pitch in between a C and a C sharp, or a pitch in between E and F, something like that. So if you want to tap into the power of these micro tuning tables, this is where you do it. You can select a tune file, and then you just turn it on. And if you head over to the manual, remember from the logo user guide, you can see exactly where to put those files on your hard drive so you can access it from the interface here. And that's it for the top section of the Tweaks and FX page. Next up, we'll go over the parameters we haven't yet gotten to for the additional envelope controls and ramp 1 and ramp 2. So stay tuned, I'll see you then.